Welcome to Season 5 of the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and Agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. Anyone that listens to this show knows that category leaders are using data-driven customer engagement to create better customer experiences, more loyal customers, and a competitive advantage for the years ahead. Twilio recently published its annual State of Customer Engagement report, exposing the significant challenges businesses face in activating customer data and what's at stake when it's done wrong. Today, we're going to talk about customer engagement as competitive advantage and how engaged consumers that trust the brands they support become loyal lifetime customers. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Glenn Weinstein, Chief Customer Officer at Twilio. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Why don't we start by you giving a little background on your role at Twilio? And for those that may not be quite as familiar with Twilio, can you briefly explain what Twilio does?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Twilio, as you mentioned, Greg. And Twilio is a leading customer engagement platform. A lot of software developers know Twilio as a pretty famous company for our APIs, our software APIs that let you send SMS messages or connect phone calls or send emails over the internet using our software APIs. But as the company has evolved, and we're a $4 billion revenue company now with almost 300,000 customers, we've gotten pretty big and we offer a lot of different services. And one of them is a full-fledged customer data platform called Twilio Segment, which will, I think, factor into our conversation here. So we help companies and organizations of every size, from single individuals to the world's largest companies, to engage with their customers better, to know their customers better, and to use that information to communicate with their customers better.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, let's dive in here. So we're going to look at three aspects in that report I mentioned. So Twilio's State of Customer Engagement report. Let's explore the first topic, which is brands that don't personalize well leave about 20% revenue on the table. So more than half of consumers say that they'll spend more on a brand that personalized experiences, and 86% of consumers say that personalized experiences increase their loyalty to brands.
Yeah.
So what are brands overlooking when it comes to creating the right infrastructure for personalization?
Well, historically, brands have relied on third-party data about customers. They buy data, they collect data via third-party cookies, and they're treating customers, generally speaking, all the same. And that's the big gap that is called out in this report. And it's really a technological revolution over the last decade, particularly over the last 5 years. You've just got to provide a more individualized and personalized experience. As far as infrastructure, it's really two key pieces. First, you've got to collect data about customers in a more direct way based on their interactions with your brand. And the way you do that is through a piece of technology called a customer data platform, or a CDP. The second thing you need once you have a CDP in place is to find a way from a technical perspective to activate the insights that you collect in that CDP. And that's just a fancy way of saying you've got to communicate with customers using the data that you're gathering in the CDP in a authentic and personalized way. So you've got to have a piece that allows you to actually complete the engagement, communicate with customers either one-to-one or through presentation of an ad or something like that. But you've got to connect your engagement system to your CDP.
Yeah. And so, you mentioned one-to-one, and certainly even for small businesses, but a lot of people at larger brands are listening to this show, and when we say things like one-to-one omni-channel personalization, that should definitely be the goal. But even very large brands with a lot of infrastructure in place can struggle to get to this one-to-one omni-channel personalization quickly.
Yeah.
So it could be data scalability, platform scalability, or the ability to create content or campaign variations at scale. So
Yeah.
what are some smart ways that brands should be thinking about scalability and personalization?
Well, there's a time and a place everywhere in the customer funnel for one to many or one to few or one to one personalization. I'm thinking in terms of our own product, Twilio segment, is really at least two paths you can go down. You can think in terms of customer journeys, which are a little more personalized and a little more later in the funnel, or think more in terms of segmenting your audiences, which of course is the origin of the product name Twilio segment. And when you're thinking about an audience, you're really segmenting customers not on a highly individualized one-to-one basis, but you're creating audiences based on some appropriately narrow cohort. So these cohorts are defined by demographics. You don't need to personalize to Greg, but you do want to personalize to some demographics based on events that your customers have done, like say a running store. Give me all customers who have purchased a piece of running gear or an accessory or a piece of audio gear. Secondly, you create your audiences based on traits. I want all women, all newbies to running, all marathoners, and you make those as narrow as you want, and then you kind of narrowcast specific messages to different audiences. That's a great start. As you get more and more sophisticated, you get more granular in your audience creation. But anything is better than a one size fits all approach.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So let's talk about measures of success here, and I want to start with some of the short term measures. How do we know if our personalization is working? We know that the tools are working, but we don't necessarily know if it's being as effective as it could be. So what type of approaches help brands move quickly to improve experience and get quick results from personalization?
You're asking a variant of the age old question, Greg. We're 50% of our advertising budget is wasted. We just don't know which 50%.
Right.
So, to some extent, I think all campaigns share this issue, but I don't think there's anything new here. When you introduce the CDP and personalization, you're still at heart, you're talking about marketing campaigns, and marketing campaigns can be measured in reasonably accurate fashion in terms of their performance. Are you driving more engagement? Are you getting to more conversations? And how do you define engagement? Are we talking about store visits, product views, started orders, completed orders, maybe just straight up revenue for a B2C type situation? But I think the important thing that I would emphasize here is you want to tie your campaign performance to your CDP. That really is the closed loop thing that may be a little new for some marketers, is honing your audience definition, honing your journeys, honing your profiles based on the performance of the campaigns that you're seeing. So I don't know if I don't think I have any particularly new insights into measuring campaign success metrics, but yeah, that's at least what comes to my mind.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so, what about long term measures? So, beyond an individual campaign, I talk a lot about customer lifetime value, and I've heard that's one of the buzzwords of the year from some source or something. Certainly not a new concept,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of brands are thinking more about retention and long term value of customers.
Mhm.
How do you feel about this approach? And are there other metrics to keep in mind as well when we're thinking longer term?
Well, long lifetime value is a good metric because it works, and I definitely agree with that approach. But I would also advocate, especially in B2C context, looking at repeat customers. A lot of B2C brands, you're not talking about a one and done or a Boolean. You either have a good relationship with a customer or you don't. These things fluctuate over time and over the lifetime of the customer. So repeat customers, repeat visits, you can overcome. You can get lost in the data, and a single interaction is not going to tell you the whole story. But maybe short of lifetime value, maybe look at some sort of intermediate metrics: repeat customers, NPS, brand reputation through third-party surveys. And don't overlook a basic thing that I actually think a lot of brands overlook, which is just talk to your customers beyond the surveys. Your executives, your managers, your leaders, you just need to be out there and get the sentiment. You'll know pretty quickly If you're starting to see an impact in the kinds of conversations you have with your customers, if all these personalization attempts that you're making are having an impact, you'll hear it in the intimacy with which they describe your brand. I think of the leading brands that create a personalized experience in my own life. I'm a big Delta Airlines flyer. And if I talk to anybody at Delta, the passion comes through. I just appreciate the treatment I get from Delta. It's highly personalized. You'll hear it. So I think there's objective measures, and then there's just get out there and talk to your customers.
Before we continue, I'd like to make sure you're aware of the upcoming CXPS 2023 conference, May 8 through 11, 2023 in Durham, North Carolina. CXPS is a great CX event focused on professional services firms that want to know how to take the next steps to make their firm successful in integrating client experience with their firm's strategic initiatives. To learn more and register for the conference, go to clientexperience.org/CXPS-conference. That's clientexperience.org/CXPS-conference. And you can register with the code AGILE200, that's AGILE 200, for $200 off your tickets. You can hear from top professional services executives and CX thought leaders like myself through a combination of keynotes, breakout sessions, workshops, and panel discussions. Make sure to register at clientexperience.org/CXPS-conference with the code AGILE200 for $200 off your tickets. Now let's get back to the show. So let's go to the second topic in the report. And so we just talked about consumer expectations of having a great customer experience, but there's also pressure to not just do better, but there's risk of losing a customer altogether if they have maybe not one bad experience, but if they have lack of tailored experiences overall, or a string of bad experiences. And so from the report, consumer patience with bad digital experience is low. 51% of consumers are frustrated with their interactions, and 66% of consumers would quit a brand if their experience isn't personalized.
Yeah.
And this number is even more so with some of the younger generations, like Gen Z. That number rises to 75%. So, when we talk about these kind of numbers, do a lot of these customers leave after a single experience, or what are maybe even some small steps that brands can take to shore up some of their biggest weaknesses?
Yeah. Well, you raise some great data out of the State of Customer Engagement report. And think of that report as kind of having two angles on it. We just directly ask consumers, would you have a repeat business with a brand that didn't personalize? And you've quoted those numbers. They're really scary numbers.
Right.
But then we also ask brands, what are you seeing in performance? When you've provided personalized campaigns, did that increase your revenues? So a little bit of this is like, do you trust consumers when they tell you they're not going to engage again? That's a statement of intent, but who knows, right? I wouldn't give up so quickly. And I think, customer engagement at a B2C level is a very broad sum of a lot of small interactions. It's not a one or done, which is more of a B2B concept of, hey, we pitched the customer, they went with our competitor. Guess we lost them. In B2C, it's much more granular than that. And I think any steps towards personalization help. If you've provided impersonal interactions in the past, but you can personalize one type of interaction, it's worth it. It'll start to make a different type of impression on the consumer. The other thing I think is important to bear in mind as a consumer is that your opinion of brands goes up and down based on your last experience. So as long as you get another shot, let's make that last experience good. The example I think about, I'm a frequent flyer, frequent traveler. I stay at Marriott hotels. They've got 25, who knows how many different brands. You can have a bad experience in a Marriott. I might even post a negative review to TripAdvisor, but I'll probably be back.
Right.
If a Marriott's in the right location, they're competitive on price, I'll give them another try. So consumers are willing to look at the totality of a relationship. But boy, it is scary when you turn off a Gen Z or a younger consumer on your first interaction. It can be hard to recover, but keep trying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we probably have the same. I'm a Delta and Marriott person myself, so that's
Good
funny.
brands.
But yeah, I mean, and I think in those industries they also have learned early and often that building loyalty through whether it's through loyalty programs or just other other means, like they understand that you can have one bad flight or one bad hotel stay
Yeah.
to your point and still recover from that if there's enough good. And if there's I switched banks recently for my company, and kind of a new banking product at a company that I support, but had a bad experience, but the customer support that I received was so great
Hmm.
that it kind of evened out. So in other words, it was a bad digital experience, but I got on the phone with someone
Yeah.
and they talked me through it, and they were like, yeah, like this is a brand new product, but thanks for your input. And then I actually even saw it implemented, one of my ideas at least implemented a month or two later. And so, there, to your point, there's opportunity to turn this stuff around.
Yeah. There's a big surface area of types of interactions that you have with your customers.
Yeah, definitely. And so, speaking of, I guess, of that, this idea of omni-channel, every channel personalization. So, whether that's all digital or, incorporating brick and mortar and, and those offline experiences, brands can struggle here, right? And even very large ones with a lot of resources, particularly when those offline or brick and mortar retail experiences are involved.
Yeah.
What should those brands be doing, knowing that they're not going to necessarily be able to change everything or personalize everything overnight? But where
Mhm.
should they be thinking?
I actually think it's harder for large brands because you've got stovepipe systems.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about omnichannel for a second. I mean, the simple rule of customer engagement, period, is to meet customers on their preferred channels. And then once you've met them where they want to meet with you, build your customer profiles based on input from all of those channels. And regardless of what channel a customer interacts with you, provide personalization benefits. Everything I've just said is way harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
True omni-channel means recognizing that a customer who calls you today is the same customer that emailed you yesterday, and it's the same customer who shopped in your store last week. If you just think about that simple bar, a lot of brands actually, frankly, don't reach that. We are starting to see that aspiration, though, and it is becoming a competitive advantage when you can connect your in store, your on the phone, your online experience, and it's a single identity. That's the trick. We have a customer highlighted on our Twilio segment website, Veronica Beard, bricks and mortar company, and they've used Twilio segment specifically to go omni-channel and create audience segments based on data coming from all channels. That was the challenge that they were facing, and the result now is they do things like suppress ad presentation from customers with low engagement. They used to do that based on a bad survey, but now they can do it based on all sorts of data points from all channels, and create a better targeted online advertising campaigns on places like Facebook because they are able to more accurately segment their audiences. So that's an omni-channel trick, basically not just interacting with customers on the channels they want, but collecting from all the channels and creating a unified profile.
Yeah, yeah, that's and I think the collection piece is critical, right? Because as I was saying with the anecdote I gave about the banking experience, it's like any relationship, whether it's a brand relationship or a personal relationship, like someone's gonna mess something up, right, at some
Yeah.
point in that experience. And so I always say the real test of relationship is what happens when something goes wrong, right? It's when things are going great, then
Yeah.
nobody's worried. But how can a brand best protect themselves against that occasional slip up, again, knowing that it's gonna happen at some point?
Yeah.
But how do you build equity in that relationship so that when something bad does happen, it's not all lost?
I like the way you put that, Greg. Build up equity, build up some benefit of the doubt in the brand. We talked a little earlier about the totality of the surface area of your interactions with customers. It's traditionally we might say it's sales, service, and support, or you can break it down into phases. But you really start to think about it. You're interacting and you're communicating with customers in a lot of different venues. To use my Veronica Beard example, to the customer, it's the same brand whether you're dealing with a cashier or an online return, or you're looking up information, or you're augmenting your order. To the brand behind the scenes, woo, that's a lot of different processes there. And if you can at least shore up a few of them, those positive interactions start to add up and start to build that brand equity. I think I've described Twilio as a customer engagement platform. And just to define the term, like what the heck is customer engagement? We define it as the sum of all interactions a brand has with its customers. That's a big thing, especially for B2C. That is a big sum, and it builds up over hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of interactions. So yeah, an occasional slip up is fine. Think about your real life relationships with other humans. They let you down. They impress you. They make you smile. They make you laugh. They make you frustrated. But humans are surprisingly good at weighing a bunch of disparate data points and coming up with a pretty fair assessment of the degree to which they trust you. So it's just you don't need to worry about the one slip up.
Yeah, agreed. So let's move on to the last topic for today, and the third point in the report. Personalizing customer experiences requires understanding the customer. You mentioned this earlier, and empathizing with the customer, which requires having a lot of information about that customer, behaviors, purchases, propensity to buy, demographic, other information. But all of this requires customers to trust the brands with their data, and many businesses struggle to balance security and customer experience. And according to the report, 42% of businesses say finding a balance between security and CX is their biggest challenge, with 4 out of 10 consumers saying they've stopped doing business with a brand after their expectations for trust and privacy weren't met. So let's talk a little bit about this. I call it a paradox because, customers want things one-to-one omnichannel personalization, but personalization requires them to give a lot of information and collect a lot of data about them. But they're sometimes reluctant to want to give their data and their permissions in order for brands to really provide that tailored experience. So, what should brands do here to communicate with their customers about their need for good data in order to do this personalization well?
Well, the technical answer is you need to look at zero and first party data rather than third party data. But let me put that in more human terms. Humans want you to pay attention to them. What they don't want you to do is eavesdrop on them or spy on them. So think of the pre-modern tech era of shopkeepers, local shopkeepers who sold goods in a corner pharmacy or whatnot. And when customers come through the door, you get greeted by name, and they know you were in last week, and you always buy the same oatmeal, and on and on. So they remember you. They recognize your preferences. We, generally speaking, humans have a very warm reaction to that sort of respectful engagement. What they don't want is that shopkeeper to then sell your name and preferences to the advertiser down the street. Then they sort of get resentful of that. Technology has just allowed us to supercharge that either trustful or distrustful interaction we have with customers. We have, for a couple of decades now, not respected that relationship, and the buying and selling of third-party data, had become kind of a rampant problem in marketing. We're moving away from that. That era is coming to a close. So I think it doesn't mean customers don't want you to have their data. They very much do. They just want you to respect it. I want to use a specific customer example here, a Twilio segment customer, which is CrossFit. CrossFit collects a lot of data about their athletes, about their affiliates, about their coaches, and they store that data in various systems all around CrossFit. And if you're an athlete, you want CrossFit to know about you. You want to get the right interactions. So it's not that consumers don't want to be anonymous. They just want to have a first party relationship with you. And once they get it, the loyalty that engages, that engenders is huge. CrossFit has seen really impressive improvements in their relationship with their affiliate owners and their athletes because they're delivering better insights based on what they know about each athlete. That's a good thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what it kind of comes down to is don't lump all data in that bad category. That's just not how humans work.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so you've touched on this a bit, but just to dive in a little deeper, what should brands be doing from a technology perspective then, to make sure that they are effectively capturing and using that zero and first party data?
Yeah, well, think about the analogy I just gave. If you're running something bigger than a corner drugstore, you're probably going to need a tech assist in
Yeah.
remembering things about your thousands or millions of customers, and you need that information to be delivered to you in real time in the course of an interaction with your customer. So I think that's a good analogy to keep in mind from a technology perspective. You want your tech to simulate to the maximum extent possible a respectful human to human relationship. Once you go beyond that and you're thinking about mass targeting and rifling the same message to thousands, then you've done it wrong. But if you're using tech as an assist to make you the corner drugstore trusted vendor to millions of consumers, that's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Glenn, thanks so much for joining. I've got one last question before we wrap up here. If you were to summarize one or two key actions a brand should take based on Twilio's State of Customer Engagement report, what would they be?
I would start with get a good CDP, get a good customer data platform. There's embedded ones in different products, but there's so many great best of breed CDPs. We have a great one in Twilio Segment, but just get a great CDP. And then secondly, I would say make sure that once you've got one, like you've got to act on those insights with a great communications system. So make sure you've got a way to activate the insights coming out of your CDP.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Glenn Weinstein, Chief Customer Officer at Twilio, for joining the show. You can learn more about Glenn and Twilio by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.